There is a truth woven into the fabric of human existence. Nothing worth while is ever handed to you freely. Everything of real value, character, wisdom, resilience, purpose, is born from struggle. And the deeper the struggle, the more profound the transformation it produces. The climb is not a punishment, it is preparation. The mountain you face isn't placed before you to crush you. It is placed before you to summon a better version of you that could never appear in comfort. Every meaningful ascent begins with a moment of confrontation. You stand at the base of the mountain, looking up at its impossible height, and you realize that the person you currently are is not yet capable of standing on its summit. And that's precisely the point. The climb forces a metamorphosis. It compels you to shed laziness, excuses, and illusions. It exposes your weaknesses with brutal honesty, but it also reveals your untapped potential. The mountain shows you both who you are and who you could become, and then asks you to choose. But the ascent isn't merely physical. It is psychological, moral, and deeply spiritual. The slope grows steeper, not because life enjoys testing you, but because meaning grows in proportion to responsibility. As the challenges increase, so does your capacity. When you refuse to run from difficulty, when you willingly shoulder the weight of the climb, you discover that suffering is not the enemy. Aimlessness is. Pain is not what destroys you, avoidance is. The climb teaches you that voluntary struggle creates the foundation of dignity. And as you climb, something remarkable happens. Your perspective begins to expand. What once seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt terrifying becomes familiar. You rise above your former limitations. Each step grants a wider view, not just of the world, but of yourself. You begin to see patterns, connections, higher meanings. It's as though every meter of elevation sharpens your vision, your judgment, and your sense of direction. You realize that the world looks different from above because you have become someone capable of perceiving it differently. Eventually, after wounds and setbacks, after moments when you wanted to quit, after the days when you doubted whether the summit even existed, you reach the peak. And you understand instantly why the journey had to be hard. The view is breathtaking not because the world changed, but because you changed. The magnificence of the horizon mirrors the strength of the person you became on the way up. A view earned through sweat, discipline, and perseverance is infinitely more beautiful than one given freely. So embrace the climb, do not flee from the mountain. It is shaping you, sharpening you, and preparing you for a vantage point you cannot yet imagine. Remember this, the harder the climb, the better the view, not just around you, but within you. Struggle is not merely an obstacle in the path of human development. It is the very mechanism through which strength is constructed. People often imagine that strength is something you simply possess, a trait, a gift, a natural advantage. But real strength does not come from comfort, nor does it emerge from a life free of resistance. It is sculpted by adversity. Just as a muscle grows only when placed under stress, the human spirit expands when pushed to its limits. The friction of challenge forces you to confront your hidden weaknesses, acknowledge them, and then transform them into new capacities. Without struggle, you would remain fragile, untested, and unaware of your own potential. Every form of growth begins with discomfort. The individual who avoids hardship also avoids the very experiences that cultivate competence. When life removes obstacles, it also removes opportunities for internal evolution. Struggle teaches you resilience because it demands that you endure. It teaches you discipline because it requires consistency. It teaches you humility because it exposes your flaws. And it teaches you courage because it asks you to continue even when fear whispers that you cannot. These virtues are not learned from books or theories. They are carved into you by experience, often painful, often unwelcome, but always meaningful. In many ways, struggle acts like a mirror. It reflects back to you an unfiltered image of who you truly are, not who you pretend to be or who you wish you were. It reveals the gap between your current abilities and the person you aspire to become. This confrontation can feel brutal. It forces you to acknowledge the areas in your life that require restructuring your habits, your mindset, your beliefs, your routines. But this confrontation is essential. Without seeing your weaknesses, you cannot correct them. Without confronting the truth, you cannot grow. Struggle might feel like destruction, but it is actually a form of reconstruction, tearing down what is fragile so it can be replaced with something durable. Furthermore, struggle transforms your inner architecture. It doesn't simply make you stronger, it makes you wiser, sharper, more disciplined, and more capable of facing future challenges. Each difficult experience becomes a building block that adds height, stability, and complexity to your character. You become someone who is not easily shaken by setbacks because you have learned, through experience, that setbacks are survivable. You become someone who doesn't collapse under pressure because you know pressure is the birthplace of growth. You become someone who isn't afraid of life's uncertainty because struggle has taught you that you can adapt, endure, and rise again. Ultimately, struggle shapes you into someone far more powerful than comfort ever could. Strength is not given. It is earned through the repeated willingness to confront difficulty rather than run from it. Every hardship you endure alters the architecture of your inner world. It builds emotional fortitude, mental clarity, and moral character. Over time, you realize that struggle was never your enemy, it was your greatest teacher. It was the architect silently constructing your strength, brick by brick, experience by experience. And when you look back, you'll see that the moments that broke you were the same moments that built you into someone unbreakable. Voluntary hardship is one of the most powerful forces shaping a meaningful life, because it represents a conscious choice to step toward difficulty rather than away from it. When you willingly expose yourself to challenge, whether it be physical, emotional, intellectual, or moral, you signal to yourself that you are not a passive object in life, but an active participant in your own becoming. This voluntary confrontation changes the nature of suffering. Forced hardship feels like oppression, but chosen hardship feels like purpose. When you decide, I will carry this burden, you transform the weight into a source of significance. It becomes an act of responsibility, a declaration of character, and a deliberate step toward the person you want to be. Hardship, when chosen, awakens a deeper dimension of the human psyche. It demands discipline, patience, and sacrifice, all qualities that refine the inner core of a person. When you choose to push yourself, you discover that meaning is not found in comfort. It is discovered in the struggle to rise above your current limitations. People who avoid difficulty often find themselves drifting, confused, and disconnected because their lives lack the challenge that awakens direction. In contrast, those who accept voluntary hardship experience a sense of clarity. They understand what they are striving toward and why. Meaning flourishes when you take responsibility for burdens that are heavy enough to stretch you, but noble enough to guide you. Voluntary hardship also reorganizes your internal value system. When you endure challenges by choice, waking up early to train, working late to master a skill, speaking the truth when it is easier to stay silent, or restraining impulses when they beg for gratification, you develop a deeper respect for yourself. You begin to see yourself as someone capable of sacrifice and endurance. This self-respect is not born from ego. It rises from the realization that you can depend on yourself. And the more dependable you become, the more responsibility you can shoulder, and the more meaning your life attains. Meaning is the reward for repeatedly choosing the difficult path when the easy one calls your name. Furthermore, voluntary hardship elevates meaning because it aligns your actions with your highest values. When you choose to struggle for something, your future, your health, your family, your craft, your principles, the suffering becomes a form of devotion. It becomes sacred. You suffer for something rather than because of something. The late nights, the failures, the setbacks, the sacrifices, They stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like investment. You are planting seeds through difficulty that will eventually bear fruit in the form of competence, integrity, and inner peace. And that fruit tastes richer precisely because you chose to cultivate it rather than wait for life to hand it to you. In the end, voluntary hardship elevates meaning because it teaches you that a fulfilling life is not built on comfort, but on courage. You rise to your potential not by avoiding challenge, but by embracing it. You discover who you are not when things are easy, but when things are difficult and you choose to continue anyway. Every act of voluntary effort deepens your character, sharpens your identity, and broadens your sense of purpose. Meaning is not found at the top of the mountain. It is created with every intentional step you take upward, and the more willingly you face hardship, the more profoundly your life becomes infused with meaning. High peaks, whether they are symbolic mountains of ambition or the literal goals you set for yourself, demand a level of internal order that cannot be faked, borrowed, or improvised. You cannot climb to significant heights while carrying the chaos of disorganization, confusion, or lack of discipline within you. Mountains expose every weakness. They magnify every flaw. They punish every inconsistency. And that is precisely why only those who cultivate internal order can ascend them. To reach higher ground, you must structure your inner world, your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, your impulses. Without that structure, the climb becomes impossible, not because the mountain is too high, but because you are too scattered. Internal order begins with clarity. You must know what you want, why you want it, and what price you are willing to pay for it. A disordered mind cannot hold a direction. It wanders, gets distracted, and falls prey to every passing temptation. High peaks require a singular commitment, a focused aim that allows you to ignore the noise and pursue the essential. This clarity becomes the compass that guides each step. Without it, the climb feels random, meaningless, and overwhelming. But once clarity is established, each action, sacrifice, and hardship fits into a larger purpose. The mountain demands that your inner world be aligned with your outer goals, because no one reaches the summit by accident. Internal order also means mastering your emotional landscape. High goals will test your patience, break your confidence, and push you into moments of doubt, frustration, and fatigue. A disordered emotional state magnifies these challenges until they feel unbearable. But when you cultivate internal stability through self-discipline, perspective, and emotional regulation, you gain the ability to withstand the storms that come with the ascent. Order does not eliminate negative emotions, it gives you the strength to navigate them. You learn to act despite fear, persist despite exhaustion, and stay calm despite uncertainty. Emotional mastery becomes the anchor that keeps you steady when the climb becomes steep and unforgiving. Habits, too, are a critical component of internal order. You cannot expect to reach extraordinary heights with ordinary habits. The mountain demands consistency, not sporadic bursts of effort. It requires a lifestyle built around progress, small, disciplined, daily actions that accumulate into competence. Disorderly habits create a fractured foundation, causing you to lose momentum, clarity, and confidence. But ordered habits create a rhythm, a structure that gradually builds the strength required for high achievement. The mountain rewards those who live in alignment with their goals, who practice self-control, who show up even when motivation fades. This internal structure becomes the invisible scaffolding holding you steady as you climb. Ultimately, high peaks demand internal order because the summit is not just a place. It is a state of being. Reaching it requires transformation. You must become someone capable of carrying the weight of the journey, navigating its dangers, and sustaining its intensity. The mountain forces you to clean your inner room, to remove distractions, align your values, strengthen your resolve, and cultivate discipline. Only then does the path upward open. And when you finally reach the peak, You realize that the true victory was not conquering the mountain, but conquering the chaos within yourself. The summit simply becomes a reflection of the order you built inside. Elevation, whether literal or metaphorical, fundamentally alters how you see the world. The higher you climb, the more of the horizon you can perceive, and this shift in vantage point changes everything. Your judgments, your priorities, your understanding of your own life. At ground level, your vision is narrow. The path ahead appears limited. Problems look larger than they are, and obstacles seem like permanent barriers. But as you rise through effort, discipline, and growth, the world opens up. What once looked impossible becomes manageable. What once seemed confusing becomes clear. Elevation restructures your perception, showing you that life is bigger than the immediate struggles that used to overwhelm you. One of the greatest gifts of climbing higher is the ability to see patterns. When you're low, every setback feels personal, every failure feels final, every challenge feels like an attack. But when you ascend, you begin to see that hardship is not a punishment. It is a universal experience, a natural part of every meaningful journey. Perspective softens bitterness and transforms anger into understanding. You recognize that life unfolds in cycles, that growth often hides behind difficulty, and that many of the storms you feared were simply transitional phases. Elevation gives you wisdom, the ability to interpret events not emotionally, but insightfully. You begin to understand why things happen, not just that they happen. Elevation also expands your sense of responsibility. As you climb, you not only see the world more clearly, you see your role in it more clearly. You realize that your choices ripple outward, influencing others and shaping the environment around you. With a higher vantage point, your life no longer feels like a random collection of events. It becomes a coherent story with direction and meaning. You start to recognize the long-term consequences of your actions, which strengthens your sense of duty. Responsibility becomes not a burden, but a privilege, the acknowledgement that you have the power to shape your future and contribute something valuable to the world. Rising higher also elevates your self-understanding. From the peak, you can look back at the path you've traveled, the mistakes, the victories, the sacrifices, and appreciate how each step shaped who you are today. You see your past not as a chain holding you down, but as a foundation lifting you up. You recognize how far you've come, how much you've endured, and how much potential still lies ahead. This perspective builds confidence, humility, and gratitude all at once. It teaches you that the journey was never meaningless. It was the very process through which you became capable of seeing the world with greater clarity and depth. Ultimately, elevation expands perspective because it allows you to transcend the limits imposed by fear, confusion, and narrow vision. It shows you that life is vast, possibilities are abundant, and meaning is always available to those who rise above stagnation. When you look from a higher place, you understand yourself and the world in ways that were impossible from below. The climb gives you the capacity to interpret life with maturity, wisdom, and discernment. And with each level you ascend, the world becomes more beautiful, more understandable, and more filled with opportunity, proving that the view truly does improve the higher you climb. The relationship between struggle and reward is not accidental. It is intrinsic and inseparable. People often imagine that the best rewards come from talent, luck, or effortless success. But this is a profound misunderstanding of how human beings derive meaning. A reward that costs you nothing ultimately means nothing. The struggle gives the reward its weight, its beauty, its emotional gravity. Without hardship, the outcome feels empty, temporary, and easily replaceable. But when you fight for something, when you sacrifice time, comfort, and security, the reward becomes a symbol of your transformation. It represents not only what you achieved, but who you had to become to achieve it. Struggle acts as the refining fire through which value is created. Think about anything truly worthwhile: mastery of a skill, the building of a career, a disciplined body, a stable relationship, a meaningful purpose. None of these emerge from ease. They require patience, consistency, and resilience. They demand that you endure long periods of uncertainty and challenge. It is within this difficulty that you develop the virtues necessary to hold the reward once you earn it. If the reward were granted instantly, without struggle, your character would not be strong enough to sustain it. The hardship is not a barrier blocking the reward. It is the training preparing you for it. The struggle also changes your perception of the reward. When you climb a mountain, the peak feels sacred because of the pain embedded in every step beneath it. When you endure failure after failure while pursuing a dream, the eventual success tastes sweeter because it carries the memory of everything you overcame along the way. The value of the reward grows in direct proportion to the difficulty of the journey. This is why people who achieve something easily often lose it quickly. They never bonded with the process. Those who struggle, however, internalize the meaning behind the reward, and that meaning becomes a source of lasting fulfillment. Furthermore, struggle deepens gratitude. When life gives you something without effort, gratitude rarely appears, entitlement does. The mind begins to treat blessings as expected rather than earned. But when you fight for something with all your strength, gratitude becomes a natural response. You appreciate the journey, the growth, the failures that taught you resilience, the moments when you almost quit but didn't. Gratitude gives the reward life. It transforms achievement from a trophy into a memory, a story, a source of ongoing motivation. Without struggle, gratitude cannot take root. Without gratitude, the reward cannot nourish you. Ultimately, the reward is inseparable from the struggle because the struggle is what makes the reward meaningful. It is the forge that shapes your character, the process that expands your abilities, the challenge that reveals your potential. When you look back at your hardest battles, you don't just see pain. You see the foundation that supported your highest achievements. The struggle gave the reward depth, purpose, and emotional richness, and this is the great truth of human existence. The greater the struggle, the deeper the reward. You don't just earn something through hardship, you become someone capable of truly appreciating it.